How much money do you possibly need to be happy? When will enough be enough? Are some of the last words that my father spoke to me many years ago before he started on the decline. And I want to share some of the thoughts and sentiments about what my father spoke to me about. Many years ago, I was in the middle of my career, as most of us are. We get too busy to spend time with family, too busy to spend time with friends. We just get too enthralled in our careers, thinking that that's what we have to do to be the great upcoming stars, the great societies, the great members of society that are only doing great things in our careers as well as for everyone else. But what we fail to realize is often we lose sight of the things that matter the most to us. Well, welcome back to the hustle and welcome back to the grind, everybody. And today's another glorious day. And today I thought I'd take a bit of a stroll. It's very cold, minus 30 out here again, but there's no wind, at least the sun's shining, and I thought I'd go for a coffee. I'm only 5 minutes out of the store and already it's kind of cold. So it doesn't take very long in this weather. But yeah, I want to get to the story. Well, the conversation I had with my dad back many years ago, some of his last words before he was while he was still unfortunately able to speak, as a lot of you know, he unfortunately succumbed to dementia. Many years of deterioration wound him up in a home because it was a lot for us to manage, specifically for my mother. And it was a hard go. My dad was a tough, kind of like old school farmer type. He spent many years working at hard jobs. He grew up on a farm doing farm work, and then he grew up on a railway, and then he grew up building houses, or extended his career building homes and houses, and wound up finishing his career as basically a superintendent overseeing building of houses. So he had a lot of experience, hands-on. He was strong, he was silent, but when he spoke, his words often really cut to the chase, really cut deep. And that's what I found with him. Now, early on, in our early years, it was always, hard for a young person like me, growing up in a household. Our father was the silent, the strong type. He would show us, but he wasn't to spend a lot of time talking about things. He would show us how to, do basic carpentry skills, took us out fishing from time to time. And certainly as I got a little older, he took me out golfing, and we actually became golf buddies. We pretty much golfed at least once, maybe twice a week. At least Sundays, we typically went out golfing. We always liked to get that first tee time. I know he was absolutely adamant about getting that first tee time, when the dew was coming off the greens and nobody was out yet. He'd like to get in there, get his 2.5 hour round of 18 holes in, and then get home, and then the day just begun. That's wonderful, and I agree. I love it. And I learned some of those great attributes from my dad. Some great ways to look at these things. I mean, everybody goes out there at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but the way we looked at it was that's too busy, too much chaos, too many people. A lot of the hacks were out there, and then of course you had a lot of attention by the golf course marshals. Often meant that you were under the scrutiny to be push, but you had a lot of resistance, and it just wasn't necessarily the most relaxing game. The most relaxing game, me and my father back in the day, came from those early rounds. We're the first one on the tees, where the marshal just turned the lights on, or the golf attendant just turned the lights on in the clubhouse. We paid our dues, grabbed a cart, and zoomed away. Sometimes most days we had to wipe off the seats off the golf carts because they were full of dew and it was still wet. So it was just an absolute magnificent time, and I learned a lot in those days when him and I used to golf together, and we'd spend a lot of days in that era where I was, kind of early to mid of my career, just married, learning a lot of things from my dad on the fly. A lot of things I didn't necessarily pick up from him early on in my life and early on in my career. But as time went on, I learned a lot more about him. And it really opened my eyes to some of the things that really matter most. And, he was the kind that, like I said, wasn't much to talk on, and he wasn't the type, certainly didn't have a lot to offer up verbally. He was just more lead by example. And realistically, later on, I remember some conversations that we had while we were out on the golf course, him and I, and, we're getting up onto the 4th tee box over on Ravencrest Golf Course there on the northeast side of Edmonton. Anybody who knows that area will know exactly what I'm talking about. Ravencrest, that was our membership. He actually had a membership there for a few years. And we had lots of great conversations about how's school, how's work, how's married life, how's, a lot of things, cars, how's everything going. We'd have a lot of great conversations. And one thing that came up, and that really stuck with me too, was, and we know, and I mentioned this before, how he had retired kind of early and then sort of lost interest because he didn't have friends to golf with, other than me, maybe once a week. But during the week, he didn't really have a lot of golfing buddies, and he certainly didn't have a lot of other hobbies. And then not only that, on top of it, he actually had his company called him back and said, "Hey, Marv, would you come on back and build a few more projects for us? We'll make it worth your while." So, the combination of him sort of running out of things to do in his retirement years, the combination between that and the company offering him sort of a lucrative arrangement to get back to work, he succumbed. He went back to work. But while he was doing that, and we were out golfing, we had a conversation about how he said, "Look, Mark, I know you're in the middle of your career, and I know it's important that you be the best that you can be, and you build your career into something that's sustainable and that you enjoy doing. But if there's one thing that you don't want to lose sight of, one thing that won't matter in the end, and that's how much money you make." So because how much money you make is really a fleeting thing. It's something that can come, it can go. Money is realistically just the tool and the instrument that we use to help facilitate other things that we actually enjoy in life. Like the golf membership. Sure, that was a nice add-on. But realistically, the things he said that were most important was satisfaction in your life and just enough money to keep the lights on. Any more than that, and all you're doing is pursuing an endless pit of despair. Because sadly, when you look around at the corruption, that we see in governments and corporate world, all we see is a world that's designed inherently to extract as much money as physically possible from each and every one of us. And so the idea of chasing the eternal dollar with that carrot hanging in front of us just doesn't make much sense. Because you'll never have enough. I mean, if you keep thinking about, I've got to keep searching for more and more, I've got to make a little bit more money, I've got to make a little bit more. If your attitude is always seeking for the next big thing, you'll never have enough. And those are some words he told me. As we were getting into it, he basically focused on the idea that family, health means more. And he even himself admitted that he's not sure why he went back to work. It was pointless. Rather, he should have spent a little more time, maybe focusing, the rest of us, family all together, maybe do more golfing, certainly maybe join some clubs. And now retrospectively, of course, he looked back and said, you know what? We all could be more creative and find things that matter. Because what doesn't matter is all this money that we're making. In the moment, it seems like the right thing to do. It's very opportunistic, but we're giving up our life. And the unfortunate part was, that was so ironic because shortly after we had been talking about this, he basically quit his job, sat around for a short while, and he started to deteriorate even faster. It was a sad, sad time as we watched our father decline into an old folks' home. And then year over year, things got worse and worse and worse. So unfortunately, as we saw the years tick by, that constant echoing in my mind about those father-son combination conversations that we had continued resonating in my mind, continued reminding me what really matters. Well, what really matters is health, family. And while we need money to set ourselves up for success, you can't go into retirement empty-handed. It does help us refocus where we shift our priorities. Instead of spending that $120,000 on that new Cadillac Escalade, maybe that's some money that we can reinvest to help us retire early. And that's one thing that he focused and embedded in me was not that you don't spend, because we all have our vices and we live once. And like a lot of people say, hey, we only live once. I agree. You have to live life a little bit too. But be a little more cautious, be a little bit more choosy about some of those things you spend your money on. Whatever it is you do, prioritize, refocus, and make sure that you've got that plan in mind. So that when it's come to retire, you don't have to go back to work after a short while just to try to make ends meet or just to prevent being bored. He was a smart guy, and I never gave him enough credit back in the day. And while he didn't have a lot to say about that, he certainly didn't blow his own horn. My dad was one of the smartest, most in-tuned people that I could possibly imagine. Yeah, love the old guy, miss him, and unfortunately, really wish we could do a joint chat, but that's not in the cards. So all I can do is share some of the very sharp words that he said. Hope you all have a wonderful day.